The City of Townsville is pretty infamous for its high villain population. In fact, it's probably right up there with Gotham City in terms of just how many villains attack its residents on a weekly basis. That's not even mentioning all the crooks or plain old jerks in the city, or the Godzilla-esque monsters that always seem to pop up. Not the safest place to live, even with the Powerpuff Girls protecting it. But out of all these villains, which ones are only sort of bad, and which ones are the most cruel and sadistic? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Powerpuff Girls Villains Evil to Most Evil. Now, before we start ranking these baddies, a few quick notes to go over first. Given that the Powerpuff Girls is a sort of Monster of the Week show, there are far too many villains to count, even for us. Of course, we'll try to hit the most noteworthy and the most memorable ones. However, many of the minor villains, especially from the later seasons, will be skipped over simply because of lack of presence or lack of power. We don't want the list getting too repetitive. Additionally, we won't be listing any of the monsters that attack Townsville. Whether they're attacking because they're mindless beasts or because surviving an attack from the Powerpuff Girls is seen as a show of strength in monster society, these guys all feel pretty neutral to us. Finally, we won't be including any villains from the 2016 reboot. Because the reboot is completely different from the original show, both with the type of villains it has as well as with its interpretations of classic villains, it would just feel weird to rank them side by side. Now for this list, we'll be starting with the least evil villains and working our way up to the most ruthless. Surprising absolutely no one, we have the Amoeba Boys in dead last. For many, the Amoeba Boys aren't even considered real villains due to how harmless they are. Still, even if they fit more in the gray area than the bad tier, it wouldn't feel right to not give them a quick mention. The Amoeba Boys are a gang of, well, amoebas. Though their actions themselves may not be too evil, they still try their best to be villains, wanting the status that comes along with it. Though others may see them as complete jokes, they take their work quite seriously. They're even willing to stand outside in the cold and rain all night just so they can commit the totally awful crime of loitering and standing on the grass. Though, speaking of this particular episode, the Amoeba Boys were able to cause some damage to Townsville, albeit accidentally, by spreading their own special brand of the flu. There was also the episode where they learned how to divide themselves, quickly taking over the town until the girls managed to merge them back together. Still, when the worst thing that this so-called army did was steal oranges and cause people to get scurvy, it's a given that they'd be at the bottom of our list. Next up is fake hero and super zero Major Man. In his brief appearance on the show, Major Man did all he could to take the girl's job as the protector of Townsville, easily winning over its residents with his muscles and charm. But we quickly learned that Major Man was nothing but a phony, and that all of the crimes he had stopped were not only fake, but ones that he coordinated. He even started a fire just so he could be the one to put it out and save the day. Honestly, how low can you get? His main goal with his so-called good deeds was simply to gain fame and glory. He only came clean once he realized he was totally outmatched in an actual fight with a monster, begging the girls to help him. What's maybe the most frustrating thing about Major Man is that his superpowers are real. He just uses them for selfish reasons, and is too much of a coward to fight actual threats. No disrespect to other fandom nerds, but Lenny Baxter takes the mindset way too far. Lenny was absolutely obsessed with the Powerpuff Girls to the point where it was downright creepy. Though he obviously admired the girls on some level for their powers and achievements, he didn't really care about the girls themselves, only their merch and his status as a fan and collector. When he suddenly lost his purpose in life after collecting every single piece of Powerpuff Girls merch, he resorted from stealing personal items. When even this wasn't enough for him, he lured the girls to his apartment and captured them. Of course, kidnapping is a seriously evil offense, but unlike other villains who wanted to either kill the girls after capturing them or use their powers for their own means, Lenny just kept them in super plastic on his top shelf, seeing them as another collector's item to keep safe in mint condition. All this is pretty evil, but also extremely creepy. Up next is Hollywood filmmaker Berniernstein. In the episode Film Flam, we met this hack director when he tried to convince the Powerpuff Girls to help him make a Powerpuff movie. In reality, Bernie saw the film as a means to rob the Townsville bank without suspicion, hoping that the girls would be too distracted by filming to notice. Though we give Bernie points creatively, this is a pretty dumb plan, even if it is still evil. Along with being a hopeful bank robber, Bernie is just a jerk in general, yelling at Bubbles to keep her mouth shut when she tries to correct him. When it became clear that his plans had fallen through, Bernie decided to fully go from director to criminal, kidnapping the mayor and holding him at gunpoint. While this earns him a couple extra evil points, compared to the other villains of Townsville, he really is just a wannabe. Femme Fatale was a villainess who sought to put herself on top despite claiming she was fighting for equal rights. She was a thief who was only interested in Susan B. Anthony coins. After the girls caught her, she manipulated them into letting her go, claiming that because they were in a man's world, they had to stick together as women and look out for each other. While cruel towards both men and women, she doesn't seem to be too dangerous despite her brandishing a gun in the shape of the female gender symbol. Without superpowers, the girls are easily able to take her out. Her crimes were awful, but she didn't really cause too much damage in the end. Next up is Mike Brakowski, the worst police officer in Townsville. Officer Brakowski was, to put it simply, a bad cop. While other officers throughout the show were either ineffective against the town's array of supervillains or as incompetent as the rest of the residents sometimes were, Brakowski was lazy and actively chose not to do his job. He'd sleep through emergencies like bank robberies and would waste time stopping at donut shops instead of speeding towards crime scenes. When he finally gets fired for his poor police work, Brakowski blames the girls for making him look bad and decides to get revenge on them. Using confiscated weapons from other villains, Brakowski captures the girls after luring them to a warehouse and threatens to lower them into acid. Although it turns out that the girls are thankfully acid-proof and ultimately walk away from the incident unharmed, Brakowski didn't know that. The fact that he was malicious enough to dip 5-year-olds into acid is just seriously messed up. Blossom probably put it best: he's not a good cop gone bad, but a bad cop gone worse. Next, we have an entire family of villains, the Smith family. Originally, the Smiths, Harold, Marianne, Bud, and Julie, were just an average family. Day in and day out, Harold would go through his dull routine, silently growing more bitter as he began to despise his neighbors, the Utoniums, for seemingly having perfect lives. He began plotting an attack against the Utoniums, and although he tried to hold it together for his family and hide his passions for evil, Harold just couldn't take it anymore and ended up taking the professor hostage, threatening to melt his head off. After Harold was defeated, Marianne swore revenge against the Utoniums, not for arresting her husband, but just for ruining the dinner she had planned. With a brash personality, a need for things to be perfect, and a love for evil, Marianne is just as bad as Harold, if not worse. When Harold got out of prison, the Smiths worked together to trash the girls' home before trying to run them and the professor over with their car. Though their actions were indeed evil, their lack of any real superpowers prevents them from being placed any higher up. I mean, Harold was using a hairdryer as a weapon. This family may be crazy, but at least they aren't all that much of a threat. Time to blame it on the boogie with the Boogeyman. The Boogeyman is different from other Townsville monsters, and not just because he's smaller than a skyscraper. He's more interested in partying and dancing to 70s disco music than destroying buildings. But because monsters that live under the bed or in the closet can only come out at night, the Boogeyman tried to plunge the world into eternal darkness. He blocks out the sun with a giant disco ball, and when the girls try to stop his plans, he fights them off. In the end, Bubbles is able to destroy the disco ball and save the day. Although Boogie and the rest of the monsters seem to enjoy terrorizing the kids of Townsville, all they really wanted to do was party for a while without having to worry about any lights, or the sun harming them. You can kind of understand where they're coming from, and they certainly aren't as destructive as other villains. But the Boogeyman is still a selfish villain, putting his own party life above the rest of the world. Moving on to the former clown turned supervillain, Mr. Mime. As Rainbow the Clown, he brought smiles and joy to the children of Townsville. Before his accident, he was a totally good person, not even that scary like how most clowns usually are. Unfortunately, after being covered in bleach, he became the villain Mr. Mime. With his powers, he was able to not only suck the colors and sound out of Townsville, but also leave its citizens in an almost catatonic state, unable to react to anything. If not for the girls saving the day, this could have eventually been fatal. Still, as bad as all this sounds, Mr. Mime falls into the special category of villain, where they can't really control themselves. And it's the thing that created them that ends up influencing their actions, instead of any personal vendetta. This is proven when, after the girls reverse the effects of the bleach, Rainbow is grateful for their help and happy as ever to be back on the side of good. Granted, he still gets beaten up and arrested, but fun fact, the higher-ups at Cartoon Network were the ones who wanted this ending, not the writers. So, poor Rainbow. Similarly, Abracadabra was an entertainer whose career and life were ended by one bad day. Once upon a time, he was known as Illusion, and was considered one of the greatest stage magicians that Townsville had ever seen. But after a performance gone horribly wrong, he lost his life and swore revenge against the audience that had laughed at him, eventually coming back as a zombie. After mistaking Blossom as the girl that led to his untimely end, Abracadabra tries to kill all three of the Powerpuff Girls. Thankfully, the girls had a few tricks of their own up their sleeve and managed to put him back in his coffin. This villain, along with his debut episode, is actually one of the darkest things from the original series. And while Abracadabra didn't get to do much as a villain, he definitely left an impact on the audience. Next up is the very, very disgusting Roach Coach. Roach Coach sees humanity as nothing but a bunch of pests. Ironically, considering that he himself is revealed to actually be a cockroach in a robot body. With the help of his fellow roaches, Roach Coach takes over the city, spreading his bugs far and wide. Along with being evil, it was also absolutely gross. With how durable these bugs are, as well as their high population numbers, you have to wonder if Roach Coach would have tried to take over the entire world, had he been successful with taking over Townsville. While he caused a lot of damage, you can't really blame the guy for being so bitter, given how many humans would rather squish bugs whenever one enters their home, instead of just leaving it be. Still, trying to overthrow humanity and make cockroaches the dominant race is really evil. Though still very obviously evil, Fuzzy Lumpkins is probably the least evil of the main bad guys in the show. He's also the most antisocial, only teaming up with other villains when it directly affects him. After all, his catchphrase is pretty much just "get off my property." All Fuzzy wants is to be left alone in his woods. But while he may not be very active in the world of villainy, Fuzzy is still no less dangerous, especially when someone steals from him or bothers him. This even extends to squirrels, as seen in the episode Fuzzy Logic. He can also be pretty greedy, having no problems holding up a cashier in the opening sequence of the Powerpuff Girls movie, and was one of the core members of the Beatles, taking pride out of being the one to crush the girls with a giant rock over and over again. In the episode Impeach Fuzz, Fuzzy temporarily becomes mayor. While not the worst leader, it's clear he couldn't care less about Townsville and barely does his job as mayor, only calling on the girls to catch his pig or play jug band music. Him bringing out his cousins to wrestle alongside him when the real mayor challenges him for the position also shows just how unfair and cruel he can be to others. Along with being selfish, the guy truly only cares about himself and his property. Everything else can get blasted at by a shotgun for all he cares. Next we have another group entry, the Gangrene Gang. The Gangrene Gang are just a bunch of jerky teenagers, so they do typically jerky teenage things. They're not above trying to torment and bully innocent children, as seen in the episode where they're sent to Miss Keene's class, and in the Powerpuff Girls movie. In both instances, they're more than happy to terrorize kids who either can't defend themselves, or, in the case of the already emotionally distraught Powerpuffs, won't allow themselves to fight back. They ended up causing quite a bit of chaos just for some hilarious prank phone calls. There was also the episode where the gang all got superpowers after an incident involving snacks and the Powerpuff Girls heat ray. They spent the entire afternoon destroying the city and attacking the girls, nearly killing them if not for the source of their powers being digested. You also have the episode where Buttercup had a crush on Ace, who used this to his advantage by pretending to like her back so he could manipulate her, as well as distract her from her superhero duties, which then put her sisters at risk. While they aren't really looking for power or domination like other Powerpuff Girls villains, they can still cause quite a bit of damage. The only bright side of their group is Big Billy, who was willing to be a good guy, but only after the girls saved his life. There was also the episode Aspirations, where the Gangrene Gang helped the girls figure out how to defeat a superpowered Sedusa, but only after Sedusa betrayed them first. Most of the time though, the Gangrene Gang are nothing but mean-spirited bullies. Though not an actual royal, Princess Morbucks certainly acts like a spoiled princess. While she already has tons of money, gadgets, and status, all Princess really wants is to be a Powerpuff Girl. Of course, her lack of morality means that it's impossible for her to be a true Powerpuff, and from then on, Princess figures that if she can't be a Powerpuff, then no one can be one. Now, let's be clear, if she was just a spoiled brat with a jetpack, she'd be way lower on the list. But her evil deeds extend far past simply being entitled or trying to destroy the Powerpuff Girls. In one episode, she tricked the mayor into signing over his position and all its power to her, and with one simple decree, Princess made crime legal and allowed villains to run amok all over the city. She only reversed this law when her own stuff was stolen. In the Christmas special, she put every single kid in the world on the naughty list, making herself the only good kid in the world so she could get the ultimate present of superpowers. Who would have thought that Santa had that in his gift bag? There was also the time that she manipulated and then betrayed the girl's new friend and neighbor, Robin, in the episode Super Friends. And of course, she wouldn't be a spoiled rich character if there wasn't examples of her bribing other people with cold hard cash. The only thing we can be thankful for in regards to Princess Morbucks is the fact that her influence doesn't keep her from getting arrested, or from eventually getting disciplined by her father. Up next is the seductress with the wild hair, Sedusa. When we first met her, she was introduced as "I'm a good lady" and briefly became the professor's girlfriend. While she put on a sweet and innocent face about the professor, she was cruel to the girls, forcing them to do chores without their powers, and then getting them grounded after they snuck out to save the day. Shortly after, it was revealed that she was doing all of this so she could steal the mayor's jewels without any interference. Fortunately, the professor immediately broke up with her once he saw Sedusa's true colors before handing her over to the police. But this isn't the last time we would see her, and it could be argued that her second scheme was even more evil than her first. In Something's Amiss, Sedusa steals Miss Bellum's identity, disguising herself as her and using her charm to convince the mayor to give her days off. With these days off, she secretly went out to commit crimes and steal valuables. Sedusa then fakes Miss Bellum's kidnapping, disguising the real Miss Bellum to look like her in the hopes of having her go to jail in her place. When this doesn't work, Sedusa attacks both the girls and Bellum and tries to finish them off, even nearly drowning Miss Bellum in a pool. Then, in her third appearance, she worked with the Gangrene Gang to steal Egyptian treasures and nearly destroyed Townsville. Though she hides behind a pretty face, Sedusa seems to be totally heartless and more than deserves this high ranking. For our final group entry, we're placing the Rowdy Ruff boys just outside of our top 3. Like stereotypical bad boys and similar to the Gangrene Gang, the Rowdy Ruffs are destructive, rude, crude, and uncaring. They'll happily destroy a whole city and torment their female counterparts, all for the sake of having some fun. As far as we can tell, the Rowdy Ruffs don't seem to have any good sides, and with them being just as powerful as the Powerpuffs, that also makes them all the more dangerous. They were literally created to be bad guys. So why not have them at the top of our list? Well, a couple of reasons. Again, they were purposely created to be evil. Afterwards, they were influenced by both Mojo and him, so this is a case of both nature and nurture working together. But you have to wonder, if someone like the professor were to try and raise them, is it possible for them to one day become good? Along that same line of thought, while the boys are superpowered and are old enough to know what they're doing, they're still just kids. Just like the Powerpuff Girls are just kids. And we've seen from other episodes that the girls are just as capable of making poor, morally incorrect choices just as much as anyone else. Maybe this is a case of us just being hopeful, but we believe that there's still a line between being an awful, bratty boy and being truly heartless and evil. With that said, let's move on to the top 3 most evil baddies of Townsville. Taking the bronze medal of evil is the super genius monkey, Mojo Jojo. Though not the most evil, obviously Mojo is probably the most famous Powerpuff Girl villain. He's fought against the girls the most times, times, has had several episodes focused on him as well as his backstory, and was even the main antagonist in the Powerpuff Girls movie. He mutated stolen primates to give himself an army, tried to turn all humans into dogs twice, uses his intellect to build machines and weapons to terrorize Townsville, has attempted to kill both the girls and the professor multiple times, and the list of his evil deeds just goes on and on. Even before he was given super genius intellect, Mojo was destructive and violent. So after everything Mojo's done, why are we only placing him in third? Well, first off, though he did it accidentally, it is revealed that he was the one who caused the chemical X to be added to the formula, creating the Powerpuff Girls. He's also occasionally saved the day, like in the episode Forced Kin, where he fought off aliens trying to take over Townsville, and can even be somewhat respectful towards people, including the girls, when he's not in the middle of an evil scheme. It's then later revealed that Mojo is one of those doing the wrong things for the right reason villains, and may actually have a good side. In the 10th anniversary special and series epilogue, The Powerpuff Girls Rule, we see Mojo finally take over the world. And what does this monkey do with all that power? Well, he ends world hunger, brings world peace, and even gives everyone a free puppy. So, talk about a plot twist. As it turns out, Mojo only wanted to rule the world so he could make it better. While this by no means excuses all the awful things he did in an attempt to gain power, and you could even make an argument that this was just a silly non-canon special, we still have to give credit where it's due. Mojo was, in the end, a good guy, but only for like 5 minutes. In the end, Mojo became bored with peace and went back to his villainous ways, showing that maybe Mojo really is just a bad monkey after all. For our second place baddie, we have to give the Silver Medal of Evil to Dick Hardley. Dick was another one-shot villain, only appearing in one episode, but man, did he leave an impression on viewers. Although he had gone to the same college as the professor, he was more interested in making a quick buck than helping the world through science. When he first met the Powerpuff Girls, he saw them as something every person in City would want, given their cute exterior and ability to protect others from harm. After manipulating the girls into telling him how they were created, Dick recreated the famous formula, hoping to make a profit through his new Powerpuff Girls Extreme. Because these Powerpuffs weren't made with love and good intentions, they were shoddy and fell apart, eventually becoming abominations. Of course, as long as he could still make money off them, Dick couldn't care less. When the girls confronted him, he became a monster both inside and out after swallowing the chemical X. He then tried to drain the girls of their chemical X, nearly killing them in the process. He is ultimately brought down by his own creations after they realize he didn't have any love for them, and is killed in a fiery explosion. Selfish, cruel, greedy, and literally monstrous, Dick is the worst human that the girls face. But there is still one other character that outmatches him in terms of villainy. Earning the gold medal of most evil, we have none other than him. We're sure many saw this coming, and while it would have been nice to subvert expectations, there was just no way we could give first place to anyone else. After all, him is a literal devil. It's hard to get much more evil than that. He's also well known for his schemes, focusing more on the psychological than the physical, showing that he would much rather torment his victims before destroying them, just to make it all the more satisfying for him. With his dark powers, him is also the strongest villain that the girls face, able to alter his size and transform at will, as well as a wide array of other powers. He's also perhaps the most deranged. His most infamous episode is Speed Demon, where it's revealed that without the Powerpuff Girls, him was able to take over Townsville, turning it into a wasteland and leaving many residents husks of their former selves, including the professor and Miss Bellum. Just knowing that this was a possibility absolutely traumatized the girls. Episodes like Octa Evil and Tough Love also show just how cruel him can be, from using Bubbles' plushie as a means to manipulate Bubbles and turn Blossom and Buttercup against each other, to using his mind control powers to sway the hearts of Townsville and brainwash them, forcing the girls to fight off people who they loved. It's even canon that this guy is so evil and so vile that you can't even say his real name, hence why he only goes by him. That is evil. Even other villains respect him, with Mojo even calling him Sir. Even when him is in a more comedic role, like when he and the professor made a bet over whether or not the girls could solve his riddles, with the prize being just a free breakfast, you just know in the back of your mind that him is a true threat, and his power, nor his evilness, should never be taken lightly. As such, he more than earns the top spot on our evil list. But what do you think? Who is the most evil Powerpuff Girl villain? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters from your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.